government using travel ban to make pressure against its critics. Another way which is government systematically used against independent voices is pressure against, physical pressure against journalists and human rights defenders. To Turkey. Turkey also arrested him and extradited in 1 hour to Azerbaijan. This is also a clear example for Azerbaijani authorities successfully using Interpol mechanism to extradite his critics. Turning back to two cases, another case I just want to conclude my speech with case of Mehman Hussein, which is also my younger brother. He's 10 years younger than me, but is one of the famous and well-known human rights activists in Azerbaijan. He's using social media. He has millions of followers in the Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And after his long-term criticism, Aliyev decided to arrest my brother and put him to the jail with defamation charges. And this happened when President Aliyev appointed his own wife to vice president positions. And concluding with the reason, in country when president able to stay unlimited terms on the president's position, when he nominated his wife to vice president position, to second powerful position in the state hierarchy, it's impossible any way to respect for human rights or rule of law. And our call to Council of Europe in these conditions, Council of Europe need to start strong and direct sanctions against Azerbaijan government in all international institutions, even in Council of Europe, even in OSCE, and even in UN, because Azerbaijani government, I'm concluding with all of you remember the case with Azerbaijani Landromat, when they spent $3 billion euros for buying political influence from Western politicians, and now it's time to ask them for responsibility, because we paid very huge price. And finally, I want to conclude my speech. My family lost my mother 2 months ago. She died in the hospital because my brother arrested. And today, it's not only my mother, also my colleague Asimali, which was killed in 2015 for his human rights activities. All of these silent already voices need justice, and we call for justice here in the Council of Europe. And thank you very much for your attention, and we're happy to respond to all your questions.
Second in row will be Ludmila Kozlowska, but not after thanking you, Amy, for your very personal also, but very elaborate story. Thank you for this. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear friends, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ludmila Kozlowska. I represent Open Dialogue Foundation, human rights organization based in Warsaw, Brussels, and Kiev, and usually we work with post-Soviet region, defending everybody who is politically prosecuted in this country or outside this country within framework of abuse of extradition request or Interpol request. Until 2017, we presented Poland as actually a successful story, as a successful story of transition and transformation where actually countries from post-Soviet region has to follow. But unfortunately, it's not the case anymore, and instead of being inspiration and models to follow, since law and justice took power, Poland has been adopting post-Soviet standards of state governance and public of life. In my example, an example of more than 2,000 peaceful protesters who actually have persecution and ongoing trials in Poland, and even judges who are prosecuted there, it's a bright example. The ruling party, Law and Justice, started dismantling the constitutional order by seizing control of the judiciary, having control over the law enforcement and state-owned media, with country's president, Andrzej Duda, serving as its puppets. It involves into the further centralization and authoritarianism in the country. The escalating assault of the rule of law in Poland is not a just abstract issue. It has very direct human dimension. According to various reports, including those who are prepared by Obywatele RP, or Citizens of Poland civic movement, there are more than 2,000 ongoing proceedings against peaceful protesters defending the constitution, fighting for women's rights, or standing up for various radical right-wing and fascist groups in Poland. I want to underline 2,000 ongoing proceedings against peaceful protesters. Okay, we as Open Dialogue Foundation can understand that it's hundreds of protesters prosecuted in Kazakhstan, in Russia, but in Moldova, but in Poland, a country which was a symbol for many of these countries, it's unacceptable practice. Although not comparable in terms of severity, the current harassment and repressions of activists have absolutely no precedent since the fall of communism in 1989. Activists of Committee of Defense of Democracy, the Citizens of Republic of Poland, women's rights and anti-fascist movements, as well as ordinary citizens voicing for their concern, have found themselves under the pressure. We were actually among thousands of people in Poland protesting in defense of rule of law in July 2017. My husband did a post on Facebook on his personal account, and the next day a huge wave of hate speech and different kind of repressions faced our organization and we as a family personally. We have been accused of intending to provoke a bloody revolution, so-called Bloody Maidan, and planning to overthrow the government in order to achieve the interests of foreign states and actors such as George Soros, the next was Russian accusation, then Germans, and even so-called Brussels elite. And Ukrainian nationalists, various foreign intelligence services, of course, how it can be without that, because I'm Ukrainian national, so that's why, of course, I was accused also to be a Ukrainian nationalist. State-owned and pro-government media outlets have been producing new fake and conspiracy theories about our organization, and I know that it sounds for you like I'm speaking about Russia and Moldova or Kazakhstan, but actually I'm speaking all the time about Poland. And it's very shame for me, but it's reality that Poland very much resembles its Russian counterpart and used Russian-style propaganda. Even in terms of the anti-European sentiment, which is fully in line of rhetoric of Poland's highest official. For example, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said that EU funds are important because they help to renovate impairments, but much more good is brought by the peace government. And a few weeks earlier, Polish President Duda has described EU as an imaginary community. The next step was to organize a special tax custom control against our organization, which least until now, and no any kind of wrongdoing was found out. So basically, I have no criminal charges. I have no any kind of violations in Poland which can be faced with me or my family members or our organization. But nevertheless, on the 31st of July, I was placed in Schengen information list ban as a national security threat for Poland with the motivation. Basically, there was no motivation. I was informed about it when I came to Brussels and gave my passport to Brussels police border to be controlled. And I would say that Mr. Waszczykowski, who is the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, recently justified the ban, claiming that he had been conducting anti-state activity but influencing foreign politicians abroad, particularly in Brussels. He really was very much worried about receiving my emails with information about violation of human rights in Kazakhstan, and he thought that actually it could be the case in case of Poland, that I could damage the reputation of Poland being abroad, and it was preventive measure. So officially we don't have any paper. There was the only communicate that special services of Poland have doubts about financing of our organization, but there is no official paper sent to our lawyers, and when we tried to even send some kind of request, there was no reply, because actually our finances sources were known for many years, placed on our website, and we even had special license which was given us in order to have to be able to transfer humanitarian aid for Ukraine from Poland to Ukraine, including self-defense ammunition. And to obtain this license, we had special checking of all our funds by different special services of Poland. And it's during 2016, the year before actually everything happened in Poland, our organization was checked once again. So it's Minister of Interior from Poland, which was a representative of Law and Justice Party, did actually checking of our organization and has no questions or wrongdoing found. But anyway, once my husband did this post on Facebook, I was announced as a enemy of the state, and top officials of Poland actually was speaking in which way they are going to shut down our organization or deport me. But I would like to bring your attention what actually impact it had not only in Poland, but also abroad, in Moldova and Kazakhstan. Because in this country, we actually have carried a defense on 21 persons in Moldova and more than 150 politically persecuted persons in Kazakhstan. Both in these countries, it's ongoing repressions towards those whom we defend. And first of all, it's judges, it's lawyers, it's peaceful protesters, it's relatives of lawyers, and many others. And actually, the biggest problem that, for example, Moldovan authorities, which are controlled by Vlad Plahotniuc, use the accusation with a fake basis, accusing me as a threat for national security in Poland, said that I'm actually a threat for national security and did damage for Moldova. And on this basis, there was created a special committee in Moldovan parliament, and it's a basis to interrogation of oppositioners, judges, lawyers. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm finishing. In this country, and an even worse situation actually in Kazakhstan. But my general call, what actually I would like to ask Council of Europe and all of the present, that although the propaganda is today, Poland and Russia very much resemble each other, little can be compared with the gross human rights violation conducted by Russian state. And with alongside with Ukrainian civil society and members of the parliament, we support the campaign to maintain sanctions imposed to Russian Federation by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I would like to recall a few striking things. There is more than 100 politically persecuted person in Russia, and I would say even 70 Ukrainian political prisoners there. They cannot be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, especially also for that you responded so quick to my question to finalize, and still with a very clear demand on the Council for the Council of Europe. Thank you very much. Let's give the floor to Maître Gregory Touan Dieu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello everyone. Very briefly, I am an attorney at law, registered at the Strasbourg Bar Association. I am an expert in international law, and in particular in international and European human rights law. I am a former senior case lawyer at the ECHR, and I am the president of ELU, European Lawyers Network, which is over 500 lawyers all over Europe. So I'm here to speak about the very recent case against Azerbaijan, Intigam Aliyev versus Azerbaijan. As you may know, the European Court issued a violation case against Azerbaijan on behalf of Intigam Aliyev. I am one of his lawyers, and the third on the list. Briefly, the case concerns a national from this country, Intigam Kamil Aliyev, that Emil knows very well, a well-known human rights activist, lawyer, and civil society activist. He was one of the first Azerbaijani lawyers to use the ECHR before national jurisdictions and to bring cases, many cases against Azerbaijan. These cases exposed deep corruption and discrimination against opponents of Azerbaijan's ruling party. Aliyev Intigam has been an expert and local partner of a number of international, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, and I've been told just a minute ago that he's been given a special status as an observer of the INGO, as an expert of INGO legislation. He's finally the head of the Legal Education Society, a well-respected human rights organization. So on 20 September this year, the case is not yet final, but I guess it will be soon, in 3 months. The ECHR has found a number of violations in Azerbaijan's investigation and detention of Intigam Aliyev. This case goes back to 2014, when the Prosecutor General of this country decided to launch a massive criminal investigation into his activities as a lawyer, but also against the activities of the civil society, NGO and INGO. In August 2014, he was arrested and charged with illegal entrepreneurship, large-scale tax evasion, and abuse of power. So we all know, all of us on this side of the bench, what it means when human rights activists face these kind of criminal accounts. His home and professional premises were searched, and all his case files, all, I insist, computers, accountant documents, case files concerning cases brought and pending to the European Court of Human Rights were confiscated. He was held in pre-trial detention for 10 months, and he was convicted and sentenced to 7.5 years of imprisonment in April 2015. He received later a conditional early release, a decision adopted behind the curtains, in March 2016. He introduced 2 applications forms on October and November 2014, in which he complained about the inhuman and degrading treatment of his detention, the lack of adequate medical treatment during his detention, the lack of justification of his arrest and pretrial detention, violation of his private life, home and correspondence, and the restriction of his rights for purposes other than those prescribed for in the Convention. I'm thinking about Article 18. The court found multiple violations of Article 3, Article 5, Paragraph 1, and 4, Article 8 and Article 18 in relation to Article 5 and 8. The court found that the search of Intigam Aliyev's home and office during the criminal investigation, the seizure of his files and his subsequent detention were intended to punish and silence him as a critic of the government and human rights activist. In addition, the court went on to state that the case was part of a troubling pattern of arbitrary arrests and detention of critics of the government and civil society and human rights activists. So I think that this case is very important because this is a signal, a very clear signal for the state of Azerbaijan, a damning indictment of the Azerbaijani authorities. The court also highlights the systematic failure of the domestic courts to provide any measures of protection and calls on the government of Azerbaijan to stop the misuse of the criminal law in these ways. As to Article 5, among other violations, the court ruled that the authorities had charged and arrested Intigam Aliyev on insufficient evidence. So basically, there were no supported documents, no proof at all. And the donors themselves, who had provided funding for Intigam Aliyev's organizations, have never complained that the money was spent improperly. What is important in this case is the many citations, quotations, and references to international human rights law, such as the observations of the Human Rights Committee, the UN Special Rapporteur, and in particular the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, which is a hot topic for the INGO. The situation is as follows today. Yeah, I will finish 30 seconds. He still faces harassment. He is prevented to exit the country. His case files were not returned to him. His documents were not returned to him. His personal and NGO bank account remained frozen, and his offer is still sealed. In addition, he did not receive any compensation or full compensation from the government of Azerbaijan in all the cases that he won. Sultanov and others versus Azerbaijan, and the case Ajibeli and Aliyev against Azerbaijan's final decisions. Thank you
very much, Maitre Touron. At this moment, there's a lot to do about Mr. Aliyev still. And I think we cannot expose this totally unjust case often enough in this House. May I now give the word to Mr. Yuri Giblatze and wish him much inspiration and only 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Yuri Giblatze. I'm based in Moscow, and my organization is called Center for the Development of Democracy and Human Rights. And I'm here in Strasbourg this week with my colleagues from a large network of EU Russia civil society, where I coordinate the advocacy work. Well, importantly, shrinking space for civil society in Russia is part of a global negative trend. In various countries, protection of national sovereignty, resistance against imposed foreign values and security concerns regarding terrorism and migration crisis, again in quotes, are the most often used pretext and justifications for restrictions on civil society. Such restrictions, however, usually do not meet the requirements of legality, necessity in a democratic society, and proportionality as stipulated in international law. Space for civil society is eroded now not only in the countries in the East with their authoritarian tradition of stifling independent critical voices, but also now in democratic Western countries, especially in the context of security concerns, as well as in Central European countries, which are affected by the rise of populist national populist politics with a focus on the protection of national sovereignty. Anywhere where we observe the growth of nationalism, conservative right-wing politics, populism, focus on protection of traditional values and criticism of international organizations and legal regimes, we inevitably see pressure on civil society and persecution of human rights defenders. Be it Azerbaijan, which has been very much the focus of the Council and the Assembly, or Turkey, where hundreds of human rights defenders have been detained on false charges of supporting terrorism, or Ukraine, where physical attacks, restrictive legislation, criminal investigations, smear campaigns have targeted anti-corruption NGOs, LGBTI and Roma activists, and where a law on foreign agents, ironically similar to the Russian law, is now discussed by the legislators. Or Poland, as we heard from Ludmila, with its targeting of critics of the government and those who don't support traditional values and protest against the government policy of the government. Or Hungary, where the populist government adopted a transparency law very similar to the Russian foreign agent law and refers to the human rights groups as the mafia-like Soros agents. Or even Austria now, where critically minded NGOs have been sidelined and squeezed out of the consultation process with the government. Or Italy, where humanitarian NGOs that were carrying out search and rescue missions for migrants in the Mediterranean Sea were subjected to a smear campaign which branded them as facilitators of illegal migration and had to ultimately were forced to downsize or cease their humanitarian operations at sea. Clearly, Russia is a leader in this trend. Laws, policies, and tools used by the Russian government to suppress independent civil society are copy-pasted by many governments in Asia, Africa, and now in Europe. We call it sharing of worst practices. Backlash in Russia against civil society is, of course, part of a larger evolution of its political system, aimed in dismantling democratic institutions and eliminating government accountability to the public, and retaining the power in the hands of the autocratic ruler and his corrupt associates. The situation has been discussed with civil society in Russia, has been discussed in this building, in this council, and the assembly many times. Therefore, I will just remind the main elements of repression, which is, of course, not a new development. It started 15 years ago gradually, but intensified rapidly in May 2012 when Vladimir Putin came back to the Kremlin for his third term and pushed through the Duma very quickly a package of repressive laws. Importantly, shrinking space for civil society in Russia is a result not only of changes in the legislation and policies specifically focused on NGOs, but of sweeping restrictions on fundamental freedoms of expression, association, assembly, movement, protection of privacy, freedom from discrimination, such as in the case of LGBT, and the right to fair trial. Anti-extremism law is a powerful tool also in the hands of authorities. This backlash turned into real avalanche since the annexation of Crimea and the beginning of the war in Ukraine in spring 2014. Public mood in Russia was such at that moment and thereafter that Russia is in a state of war and critical voices are perceived as treason. Not surprisingly, NGOs and activists who were exposing Russia's direct involvement in the war in Donbass, speaking up against annexation of Crimea, have been very much targeted by persecution. The foreign agent law, this infamous foreign agent law, came into force in 2012, so it's been 16 years. Throughout this period, we had 165 organizations designated as foreign agents, out of which, over the years, about half was taken off the list because they ceased to exist, had to close down out of pressure, or gave up foreign funding. The main form of pressure in the last couple of years has been not adding new NGOs to this list so much, but levying very high financial penalties, essentially bankrupting organizations. and adding new types of activities that foreign agent NGOs are not allowed to do, such as observe elections. Legally, it's impossible. Monitor prisons in the public oversight commissions, and receive funding from various government funding programs, and participate in consultative bodies with the different public administrations. Importantly, the legislators are now discussing further expansion of the foreign agent concept, not only to the media, which they added already a few months ago, but also to individuals, looking at the notions of undesirable behavior and undesirable cooperation with foreigners. That brings us to the law on undesirable foreign organizations, the law adopted in 2015, essentially banning foreign and international NGOs from working in Russia if they threaten the Russian constitutional system, defense, and national security. Essentially, it means total ban. Any activity inside Russia, and criminal liability for Russian citizens for continuing to cooperate with those who are designated undesirables. We now have 15 of them on the list. 7 are donors, grant-making organizations, 5 democracy development NGOs, 2 election observation groups, and 1 environmental. They come from the US, UK, Germany, and Lithuania. As a result of all this, we have many donors have left Russia, and essentially very little financial support is available. And finally, I would like to expand the picture by highlighting, I know that my time is almost gone, but 2 particular cases, very important cases, demonstrate that in addition of on legislation and policy, we have politically motivated persecution of human rights defenders and activists. 2 cases of Oyub Titiev, to start with. Here's a t-shirt with his image. Many of you know the name. I'm very happy to tell you that just minutes ago, at the end of the session before lunch, Oyub became the recipient of this year's Václav Havel Award. We are very happy for that. Maybe it will help him a little bit in fighting injustice. He's facing 10 years on fabricated charges of possessing drugs. He has been behind the bars since January this year, and the trial over him is in a theater of absurd, where more than 60 policemen who testified as witnesses actually do not remember anything. They don't even know in what kind of uniform they serve, what kind of cars they use, and more than 20 video cameras that were along the way of his movements that day, all were broken. Ramzan Kadyrov, the autocratic leader, said that after the end of the trial, human rights defenders will be not allowed to step their feet on the territory of Chechnya, ever, and equated them to terrorists and extremists. The second case of Yuri Dmitriev, also a regional leader of Memorial in Karelia, who was charged a year ago in child pornography. He is a person who has documented, preserved, and protected sites of mass burial of Stalin repression times, mass executions in his home region. Did a very important work and has become target of pressure exactly because of that. And he was keeping photographs of his adopted daughter in his computer, where he documented the state of health of her because she was taken from orphanage. So these were used as child pornography for child pornography charges. He was acquitted in a very unusual development out of as a result of major international campaign, but rearrested immediately, now on charges of sexual assault of a minor, facing 12 or 15 years. These 2 cases, the trial of him has not started, this second trial. These 2 cases are emblematic, not only because they target leaders of Memorial, the leading human rights organization in Russia, but because they target people who fight heinous crimes of the regime, past crimes of the Stalin repression, mass repressions, and the current heinous crimes in Chechnya, enforced disappearances, extrajudicial executions, and the like. Finally, they both are charged, and this is important, and I'll finish here, that they both are charged with crimes that in the public opinion, in the public eyes, are the most repulsive, the most intolerable. This is done on purpose to marginalize, to discredit human rights defenders, and isolate them from any public support. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Julie, I could listen hours to you. Sorry that I had to cut it a little bit short. What I now want to do, still having in mind that we want to finish around 2 o'clock, is now first give the floor to the public for question and answers, and then... No, I suppose I spoke to you next. Sorry. Okay, we can add. Anna asked the floor also then as the first on question and answers, please.
Very shortly, because I know that the time is very short, and I'd like to thank you, firstly, the panelists to be here. This is the testimony of the very valuable people for which I think we should stand up today. And I also would like to thank you, permanent representation of the member states and the member and the parliamentarians who are in the room, because it is mean that we have maybe not dialogue, but interaction, possible interaction on the specific cases. I would like to just add something as the example of the engagement that we can do for the Antigam case. Very clearly, in 2015, I took the decision with my colleagues of the Bureau to appoint Antigam as the member of the Expert Council on NGO Law. So appoint, at that time, future political prisoner, but he was already arrested, as the member of the Conference of the NGOs body, so but the same Council of Europe body. And it was a very good political decision, which led us to stand up more strongly for him. And after then, I would like to just give you one example of this person, because we speak about the cases, but I don't really know if we realize that behind that, there's the humans. There's the people with their rights, and Emin example is very good because you speak about your brother, you don't speak about your brothers. So Antigam just came to the Council of Europe because I asked for the permission of the persecutor and Minister of Justice, and I received the permission that Antigam can come for 1 week in Council of Europe to our event, and he just started to his speech saying that he thanked you to the government of Azerbaijan and persecutor to put him in prison because it's a good occasion to learn English from him. Yeah, and the courage of the person, which you, Antigam and others, are so important for human rights itself. And one also case or name which wasn't mentioned, I think that it should be, because I have myself a lot of culpability as the Conference of NGOs, we don't do enough for that, is Oleg Sentsov. They have the petition. The million of people write a petition to the Russian government for release Oleg from prison, but nobody will hear about. And now, I don't know, yesterday it was the Russian newspaper who just said that Oleg stopped his strike, but I don't think that we have... Sorry? Hunger strike, yes, but I don't think that we have the information from Independent.
No, there is.
Okay, so... Okay. So yeah, but what will happen now? So the issue is really very important. I think also the Council of Europe itself, and I would like to just close my short speech to thank you to Parliamentary Assembly for a very important recommendation, the recommendation on the protecting human rights defender in Council of Europe member states, which underline the necessity of the Committee of Ministers to have the dialogue with the human rights defenders themselves, direct dialogue, and not by different mechanisms, etc. But as today we have direct dialogue with the person which are here and their lawyers, and I think that this is the direction that we really should go forward to increase the dialogue. And the Conference of the NGOs is the instrument for such dialogue in Council of Europe between the human rights defenders and the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. May I invite the people here before me to put some questions, if there are questions, or have some remarks. Maybe then if we come to an end of this, and then we have 6 minutes. Oh, there was a gentleman. Sorry, can you introduce yourself and then put your question, please?
I most certainly will. My name is Maciej Janczak. I'm the Deputy Permanent Representative of Poland here in Strasbourg to the Council of Europe. And I wanted to thank the organizers for convening this meeting and for providing various testimonies from different places on the shrinking civil society space. One personal reflection, which occurs to me not the first time during these side events of the Parliamentary Assembly, is that thank you God for freedom of speech. Everybody can say whatever they want, and this is a great game. I think that to further this game even more, I think we should allow both sides to speak. And this is an appeal I'm making to the organizers of this panel, perhaps, and I'm referring, of course, to my own country, which was mentioned several times here today, to perhaps invite an NGO, of course, an NGO, to speak and demonstrate the other side of the coin, which is not always in line with what Madame Kozłowska has presented. I do not want to go into the details. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. Everybody can say what they feel. Needless to say, I do disagree with much of what has been said in the evaluation. I, however, have a clear statement I wanted to make, and it goes as follows, that the Polish authorities maintain their position about the placing of Ukrainian citizen Ms. Ludmila Kozłowska on the system, on the Schengen system ban list. This decision has been made on the basis of the assessment of the Polish Agency for Internal Security, taking into account information about the activities of Ms. Kozłowska, as well as on the analysis of unclear sources of financing of the Open Dialogue Foundation. The decision to place Ms. Kozłowska on the Schengen ban list is not contrary to what Ms. Kozłowska claims, linked to her political activities. Ms. Kozłowska and Mr. Kramek publish anti-governmental content and conduct political activities aimed against the current Polish government. They are by no means facing any censorship or other actions from the Polish prosecutor or any governmental authorities on these grounds. As I said, contrary to what they claim. Mrs. Kozłowska and Mr. Kramek take part in political demonstration organized by the opposition and have not experienced any actions from the Polish authorities for this reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is quite giving a new line of discussion, I hope. Although I get some messages like, okay, please don't open a discussion now at this moment here. And there is the final words, as promised, are for Mrs. Olena Sotnik. So it's difficult for me, but okay, I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you so much for this sacrifice. But nevertheless, I want to tell thank you to our panelists, and also I listen to the comments from our just audience and accept that I'm a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. I'm new rapporteur on shrinking space of civil society in member states of Council of Europe. It means that, of course, I'm going to follow all the issues and facts. And reacting on the last comment, of course, we will be ready to listen to both sides. Of course, it is important to listen to both sides. Just, I think that what I heard from our panelists and what is important for me, I think we need more than a dialogue. Because there are a lot of dangerous trends in civil society and space of their actions. First of all, of course, it's legislative restrictions. I'm not going to repeat. Even in my country, in Ukraine, now it is discussion on foreign agents law, and it's also a dangerous thing. Also, it is a lot of facts of putting pressure on civil society activists and individuals, including, of course, even prosecuting them. And on the regional levels, what I noticed, that sometimes law enforcement agencies and officials, they just don't recognize and they don't have any action on investigation of violent crimes against civil society activists. So there are a lot of dangerous trends and there are a lot of challenges. And I believe that now it is an important moment when parliamentarians and NGOs, civil society, can stand together and find maybe new instruments and new tools how to protect this space of freedom and how to protect this space of activism. Because it is first front of democracy and it is first front of human rights. And the main who are protecting this, it is NGO and activists. So we are going to work on this, and I'm as a rapporteur, I'm confirming that I'm ready to cooperate and to work with all NGOs and with all representatives of official governments and to listen to both sides and to make conclusion and to find not just practical recommendations, but maybe even to find new vision how to protect this space, shrinking space for NGOs. Thank you.
As promised, this concludes our side event. I thank you all for being here. I hope that you have a safe journey home and much inspiration for future work. Thank you.
Russia, and criminal liability for Russian citizens for continuing to cooperate with those who are designated undesirables. We now have 15 of them on the list. 7 are donors, grant-making organizations, 5 democracy development NGOs, 2 election observation.